Good morning, actually, good afternoon right now. Welcome to Threat Watch, the 15-minute podcast from Lumify Cyber, where we're going to talk about some of the news articles of the week and try to make it make sense. Today, I'm speaking with my colleague for the last 30 years, Fred Langston. Fred is the EVP of Lumify Professional Services and a longtime collaborator in many crazy ideas. Fred, how's it going? You're just back from Minnesota. You're driving around seeing hospitals, right?
That's correct. Hitting the critical access hospitals in kind of north central rural Minnesota around the Brainerd Lakes area. Those are fascinating to see what a critical community resource those facilities are. And they're a threat right now because of a lot of the cuts, and we're doing everything we can to help them.
Yep, they are on the ropes. They're also low-hanging fruit for being targeted for ransomware and frankly just get knocked down to get knocked down the way that geopolitics are going now. Okay, all right. Well, let's leave that alone for right now. We'll come back to it. First article I want to talk about. Uh, you know, I can't say I'm not guilty of this myself. I am somewhat guilty of this myself, but it's this bit about password reuse, and there's a certain number of passwords that people are likely to pick, right? And what was found was half of user logins are compromised, meaning that they've found passwords for people that they have reused elsewhere. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, the data is pretty frightening, and it's kind of interesting that Cloudflare is probably one of the few people that could do this because they get to see inside your SSL traffic. Not so sure I'm comfortable with that totally, but the data is really interesting. I think there was 41% of successful human authentication attempts involved leaked credentials. In other words, people are using already compromised credentials on shared sites, and what is this doing? This is driving things like credential stuffing attacks
Yeah.
to be the legitimate now background noise of the internet. 95% of all login attempts involving leaked credentials are coming from bots. It's basically what these systems are doing on a 24/7 basis. And you find out that 76% of leaked password login attempts for websites that are built on things like WordPress or Joomla or Drupal are successful. So a lot of what you see when you hear about attacks on WordPress are people actually using these dumps of passwords that apparently people keep reusing and using that to compromise assets. The other thing that I thought was interesting, Mike, is there's an article just in today's news blast, the one that you put out every morning. People,
Hmm.
if you're not part of it, I should give it 5 days and you will always be a subscriber. Is a study that showed attackers frequently, like you said, they're still relying on basic numeric sequences, predictable variations of the word password, and
Yeah.
still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the most common password. I feel like this is Groundhog Day for passwords. When is this going to change?
It's like I say during security awareness training, right? We're going to do that at the end of the month, and one of the slides is if your password is in this list, your wounds are self-inflicted. Okay. Now, I use variations of a password in different places, and if you got one, you might be able to diddle around and figure out others. But for the most part, I try to have pretty good hygiene there. Listen, InfoSec professionals, okay, us, we work really hard to deploy preventive and detective controls, have incident response plans in place, and this kind of thing makes our job harder. When you make it easy on the bad guys, you're making our jobs harder, and it's hard enough. So use a password vault, have it pick your passwords, use multi-factor authentication, and prohibit password storage in browsers, please.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like to tell people because we have a pen testing team here, how easy it is to become a credential stuffing hacker. I mean, you download
Oh
a
yeah.
couple dumps, you run a tool like Hydra, it's basic install with Kali Linux. I mean, everybody gets it. It's brain dead easy to use, and now you're part of the background noise of the internet, and frankly one of the most successful techniques. So if you can't take out the people that are doing this with a basic toolkit, you're going to have problems in the
At
future.
least make it harder. At least make it harder. Okay. All right. All right. Enough of that. We've chastised people over and over and over. It's not going to work, so let's leave it alone. But we have to talk about the EO that came out on the 19th. Okay. We're not going to be able to avoid this. So, I read this and I've had a couple of PR requests already to talk about this. The responsibilities for infrastructure risk management and disaster response have all been pushed to the states. This is crazy. If you read the executive order itself, it's got this litany of, and here's the National Cyber Resilience Plan, and here's the set of standards that federal government has been meeting, and now they're all on you, states. So, they call on states to make common sense approaches and investments, but the order does not specify what common sense approaches are or how to fund them. So I think, we're going to have to let the dust settle around this before we find out what this means. We don't know if there's going to be challenges to this. I don't know. What do you think? What are the conversations you've been having?
Wow, this is one of the most fascinating developments I think we've ever been to. There's a lot of things that seem like I understand about it, and things I totally don't understand. I understand the concept of, the current administration is more of a states' rights, states' responsibilities approach. I get that. Um, but what I don't understand is this is national defense. When in American history did we transfer the responsibility for external national defense to the states? I mean, that's never happened before. I mean, it's not supposed to happen, frankly. The other part I don't understand is if we're transferring this huge mandate where we have to build 50 state programs to mimic what we built in 30 years in the federal
Hmm.
government, and then built the infrastructure for all these 50 states to work together, that's that's 10 years in the future when this comes together, not tomorrow. And
Good point.
the fact that where's the money coming from? Because you would think that if I'm going to kill these programs, I would return that money to the states and tax burden I'm taking from them to cover this. In other words, we're taking that, we're spending it there now. It's back to you, the states. We're giving that money back to you so you can stand up your own programs. The whole thing, while I get the conceptual idea, I see no way to get to a painless or risk free implementation, right? So I don't have answers for one of the few times in my life. I have some enormous questions. What can you tell me, Mike?
Well, I mean, it's pretty clear states are going to have to pick up the ball here, and no one knows how this is going to get paid for. So I was actually on advisory committee, state cybersecurity advisory committee meeting yesterday, and we talked about this at some length. So, we are going to need to recreate an analog of the ecosystem for infrastructure protection that was in place by the federal government. Okay, that's government coordinating councils, sector coordinating councils, ISACs for information sharing, uh, you know, and all that's going to have to be managed somehow, and it's going to have to be paid for somehow. I think the other thing that's going to happen, and this I have predicted before, and you and I have talked about this before, states are going to have to step a little more fully into regulation. Okay, there's no other choice. Some states are doing this already. For example, New York and Department of Financial Services and their analog to Health and Human Services, they have recreated regulatory standards that are applied to those organizations in New York State. And those regulatory requirements that they're hit with are very much like the ones that come from the SEC for the finance sector and Health and Human Services for the healthcare sector. And New York did this to circumvent the unreliability of Congress and the fact that, the wind blows another way and all of a sudden you're regulated. You're not. You are. You're not. Nobody wants to put up with that. So the states are going to have to step up to that. So there's a lot of changes coming. And like you say, I mean, rebuilding this framework, this ecosystem at the state level 50 times, and then getting states to cooperate because infrastructure doesn't know state boundaries. This is going to be a heavy lift. So, a lot of us are probably going to be called on to volunteer and, help put together a strategy here and figure out how we're going to do this. That's where I think this is going, at least for us in our state. All right. All right. We should probably mention that we're going to do a panel discussion at our security summit that we're going to have in Scottsdale in a couple of weeks. and we're actually going to talk about the future of regulation. And Michael Borgia from Davis Wright Tremaine is going to join us on this. So uh, if you are going to that, he is definitely a 100-pound brain, and we're going to have a lot to say, I think, about this. Okay, but for right now, we should go a little technical because there's a thing that's going on that's under active exploit right now, and it's this hijacking hole in Apache Tomcat, right? You familiar with Tomcat, right? It's like a Java server, and it is so easy to exploit that it doesn't require any skills, it doesn't require authentication, and it's going crazy right now. What do you think?
Well, if there's one thing I kind of a little bit famous for, it's my philosophy that something like this, a 9.9 CVSS score, easy to or trivial to exploit, if that is exposed on the internet, that is an incident in progress, even if they have not actually taken advantage of you yet, because they are minutes or hours probably away from finding it and taking advantage of it. The maybe the good news is Tomcat probably finds more uses internally for
Hmm.
serving up internal applications. Yeah, there are people that probably have responded quickly. But people, if you've got this and it's exposed to the internet, I'd probably drop off this call and run and start applying patches.
It's an incident. Yes, treat it as an incident. I agree. Yeah, and I would think it's more deployed on-prem than it is in the cloud because, right, it's a Java web application. It's not a full web server, so like you say, it's probably got a lot of internal uses, but as one tier of a web-facing application, I think it's deployed that way a lot. And you made a good point, right, about how it's a race now. Um, when this one was published, right, the Apache Foundation published, hey, there's a vulnerability, here's the patch. 30 hours later, the exploit campaign started. Okay. That's how long it takes. And they were probably scanning the internet for vulnerable exposures far in advance of that. I think there are going to be after effects here. I think there's going to be more shoes to drop, right? So remember the move it file transfer vulnerability and how so many organizations got whacked and now there's class action suits everywhere. This could be that big. The only question is how broadly deployed is Apache Tomcat? Because I don't see it come up that often, but it's out there. You know,
Yep.
we'll find out.
Okay. Well, time's starting to run out, and we have work to do. But I'm going to
Yeah.
set you up because I know where you're going to go, Mike. But I have to say this: my brilliant, you talked about a 100-pound brain nephew, is one of the lead design engineers for self-driving cars for Bosch, and
Oh,
I have heard more about what you're going to talk about than most people would know. And what you're going to talk about is a key flaw, frankly, in a particular company's technology. So take it away, Mike.
okay. You gotta love the name of the article. And this is not in the Register. This was in Newsweek. Tesla falls for Wile E. Coyote style fake road wall. All right. Now I watched the YouTube videos and I've looked at the kind of both sides of how reliable this was, whether or not it was fabricated in some way. But I mean, fact of the matter is they put up a big screen and made it look like a road, and it really did look like a road. But what they were trying to do was measure the difference between Tesla's cameras and another autonomous vehicle that uses LiDAR instead. And notably, the LiDAR car performed better, did not crash through the wall, did not run over the mannequin of the baby in the road, okay, which was a little disturbing. But again, there are nuances to this story, and you can read all about it. And again, it's the title that I love, the Wile E. Coyote style fake road wall. And if you're Gen Z, you're going to have to Google Wile E. Coyote to figure out what we're talking about here. It'll be obvious. Okay, all right, that's it. Sign up for the daily InfoSec Insider News Blast. Watch our site for events, and we will be doing free security awareness training on the 28th of the month. See everyone next week.
Thanks,
Hey,
everyone.
bye, Fred.